Hi, my name is Usman. I'm a photographer at Sonder Creative and senior writer at fstoppers.com, and today I'm going to be doing a relatively quick comparison between the Sony A7R III and the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. Both of these cameras are about 40 megapixels in resolution, so I thought close enough. And also I put up a post on YouTube asking if people wanted to see like a mini comparison between the two, and a colossal total of 2 people said yes, and that's good enough for me. Let's get on into Lightroom and see what these images look like. So here we have a bunch of images opened up in Lightroom. I've got the Sony on the left, the Huawei on the right. Focal lengths are obviously different, so I had to use different apertures to kind of accommodate the difference in depth of field. And I am shooting at the base ISO and using continuous lighting. So zooming in over here where I focused for both cameras, you can see that obviously the Sony is doing a better job in terms of detail. The rings on the camera module or the lens over here, it comes up a lot nicer, the tones and everything just looks a bit better. But look at how well the Huawei is holding up. Look how much detail, even the texture in the plastic on the Instax camera is coming through. You can see some of the rings, but it's not as clear as the Sony, and it's actually quite impressive how well the Huawei is holding up. I did also notice that the Huawei does have a heavy degree of vignetting. In terms of colors, they are different, but I did use the color checker to try and white balance correctly. So this is what the Huawei looks like with the correct white balance. This is what the Sony looks like with the correct white balance. Second shot, I focused over here on the wrist strap, and once again, I mean, the textures, the tonality and everything, obviously Sony's doing a much better job. But once again, a lot of that detail is still present in the Huawei. You can see the logo there, you can see the texture in the leather as well, you can see the stitching quite clearly. I mean, the Huawei is doing a pretty good job in terms of how it renders detail. And finally, I focused on the back over here with the color checker Digital SG. And once again, obviously Sony's doing a much better job. The texture in the wood, all the detail. The Sony is obviously going to be a significantly better camera with this lens as well, in comparison. Even the dust and particles that are on the color checker look more detailed on the Sony than it does on the Huawei. But then again, this is a phone, and I think considering the differences are so, I mean, you have to zoom in 1-to-1 to see the differences at this level, so it's pretty impressive what the Huawei is able to achieve. Now, this is more of a kind of a real-world comparison. I took this picture. Sony has stabilization, so, you know, 1/25th of a second is fine. And if I zoom into where I focus with both cameras, I mean, I have to say, that is a pretty impressive amount of detail coming through from a phone. That is pretty incredible. Still not quite as sharp as the Sony. And especially when you look at the pavement over here, you can see there's a clear difference between the Sony and the Huawei. But still, I mean, just look at that. For the phone to be able to do this kind of, for a phone to be able to produce this level of detail in a single image, that's pretty awesome. Once again, colors not going to be as good as the Sony. But dynamic range, not bad at all. Not bad at all. Edge sharpness is really bad on the Huawei. Whatever picture that you take, center's gonna be a lot sharper. The edges are very, very soft on the Huawei. And finally, I wanted to do a quick comparison against another 40 megapixel smartphone, the Nokia Lumia 1020. I've had this for a few years now. I think it came out in 2013, so it's about 5, almost 6 years old in terms of smartphone, which is pretty old for a camera. And zooming in 1-to-1, it's holding up pretty well. I mean, the amount of detail and the way that it renders detail is still pretty amazing. It actually has more detail compared to the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. Even when you zoom into this section over here, the way that, you know, the tones and the way that it renders the details, it just looks much better. Now, the Nokia is a much noisier camera, so even at the base ISO of ISO 100, the Huawei is doing a much better. I mean, the Huawei's base ISO is ISO 50, so, you know, it's got one stop over the Nokia, but still, these are the respective base ISOs. And yeah, Huawei is better in terms of noise, but overall detail and clarity and the way that it just renders everything, Nokia's doing a pretty incredible job. So there you have it, a relatively quick comparison between the A7R III and the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. Smartphones these days are performing really well, especially these high resolution smartphones. The amount of detail that they can get out of these sensors is pretty incredible. Obviously the full frame camera is better in almost every regard, especially when it comes to low light performance. However, the gap seems to be closing, and I think that eventually in a few years, with computational photography and multiple lenses and so on, maybe smartphones might be able to offer a viable alternative in some way. I don't think I'll be switching to smartphones even if that happens, purely because the flexibility that a larger sensor and the kind of lenses you can put on proper cameras is just not something which is going to be very difficult to emulate. But even still, pretty amazing that with a Huawei Mate 20 Pro, you've got a 40 megapixel phone or 40 megapixel camera in your pocket, and the images are actually pretty good. Anyway, let me know if these kinds of quick comparisons, or just comparisons where you're just looking at image quality and nothing else, is interesting to you. And if that is the case, then I'll do more of them. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you.